Well, thank you folks so much, and welcome to our October show. This is our 34th show, which seems absolutely impossible, but so does so much these days. So I'm your host. I'm the host of the Rally Reading Series, Ryan Matthews, and we are an overtly political reading series. There's just a lot of great political work and essays in print and online these last 4 years that we've been doing this, but especially right now. And so, we want to highlight these things and get them into the wild and kind of take them to the streets. So, we did this last year with our partner, the Rumpus, which most of you, I'm sure, probably know. They are a platform for marginalized voices and writing that might not find a home elsewhere, but they seek to lift up new voices alongside those more established writers. And at the rally, we're a little bit different as well. As I said, overtly political. So we're also going to give you folks a chance to engage and ask some questions, provide some feedback, and hopefully have kind of a room-wide dialogue, or I should say a Zoom-wide dialogue. So I hope you folks aren't succumbing to Zoom fatigue. It's real. It's out there. So be careful. And for anyone, if there are any first-time Zoomers joining us, I wanted to offer just a couple of tips. You'll see some buttons at the bottom center of your screen. So first of all, please keep yourself muted. You can also open the chat. There's a button at the bottom, you'll see. That's where you can drop your questions. You can offer some virtual applause as well. So that's a very handy feature. Additionally, if you click on participants, that's a place where you can raise your hand. So feel free to do that too. And then in the top right, you'll see a couple of options, including the gallery and the speaker view. And we recommend the speaker view so that you'll see the reader. Right now, you should see me. And I just wanted to thank the wonderful Ian McAllen from the Rumpus and Marisa. Ian will be dropping various links into the chat as we mention them, so keep an eye out for those links. And then, yeah, you'll have that chance to ask questions to the readers in the chat at the end. So we'll give you that opportunity. I'd also like to mention a special artist, the illustrator who does our work for our events, Tag Hartman Simpkins. Extremely talented. If you folks saw the illustrations of the readers, thank you so much, Tag. And we're also partnering with the Lit Hub. So this video will be available on their virtual books channel in a few days, as well as on our YouTube page, the Rally Reading Series. And as with every Rally Reading Series, we always suggest an organization for the audience to donate to, a call to service, a recommendation for sparking debate within your community, or a suggestion for how to confront prejudice or injustice. And tonight we'll be raising money for a few really good causes. I usually talk about these during the intermission, but we're not at a bar, unfortunately, to refresh our drinks at. But nevertheless, tonight we'll be raising money for MORE, M-O-R-E, a campaign from the Poor People's Campaign, which stands for mobilizing, organizing, registering, and educating people to vote. We'll also be raising money for the Movement Voter Project and the Native American Rights Fund. And we'll drop those links in the chat. And Marisa is going to tell you a little bit more about each organization in just a little bit. So feel free to donate now with those links during the show or after the show as well. And so without further ado, I would love to introduce Marisa Siegel, who is the editor-in-chief and owner of the Rumpus. And Marisa lives, writes, and edits near NYC. She holds an MFA in poetry from Mills College in Oakland, California. And her essay, Inherited Anger, appears in the anthology Burn It Down from Seal Press, and that was published in 2019. Her debut poetry chapbook, Fixed Stars, is forthcoming from Burrow Press in 2022. And you can follow her on Twitter at Marisa Says Tweet. And with that, I will turn it over to Marisa.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Is this good? Okay. I'm so excited for this evening. I so wish we were all in a bar together doing this, but I'm excited that we're on Zoom together doing it. And I will be telling you a little bit more about those organizations a little later on and why we're choosing to spotlight election integrity in general. And we'll get there, and we're going to talk a little about that stuff at the end of the event before we get to your questions also. So we're going to start off though with some really, really, really phenomenal readers reading us their words. And kicking us off is going to be Franny Choi. And just give me 1 second to get to where the bios are. Okay. Franny Choi is a writer of poems, essays, and plays. She is the author of 2 poetry collections, Soft Science from Alice James Books and Floating Brilliant Gone from Right Buddy Publishing, as well as a chapbook, Death by Sex Machine from Sibling Rivalry Press. She is a Kundiman Fellow, a 2019 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellow, and a graduate of the University of Michigan's Helen Zell Writers Program. A former news editor at Hyphen Magazine, she co-hosts the podcast Verses alongside fellow Dark Noise Collective member Denise Smith. She is a current Gaius Charles Bullen Fellow in English at Williams College. Okay, Franny, take it away.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, amazing. Sorry, there was a little weird unmuting myself, muting myself back and forth drama that played out. But hi, everybody. I'm so glad to get to spend a little bit of time with you all. My name is Franny. I'm a poet and writer of other things. Marisa and I have been talking recently about, we were recently in an email back and forth because she was super helpful in an essay that the Rumpus was gracious enough to publish. And so just like shout out to the Rumpus and shout out also to my fellow readers who are such incredible presences in the literary world. And Nate and I are good pals. And so I'm just happy to get to share the space with you all, virtual though it may be, and imaginary though it is. I'm going to read a few poems. They're all, I know that they've got this link from with my book that came out last year, but I'm going to read new work tonight. If you want to or need to read along as I'm reading, there's a link to a Google Doc that I just posted into the chat for access purposes and for anybody who prefers to look at the text. So yeah, here are my poems. It's 7:43. That's just a note to myself, not to anybody else. Okay. This one's called The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of boats. Boats of prisoners. Boats cracking under sky iron, boats making corpses bloom like algae on the shore. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of the bombed mosque. There was the apocalypse of the taxi driver warped by flame. There was the apocalypse of the leaving and the having left, of my mother unsticking herself from her mother's grave as the plane barreled down the runway. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of planes. There was the apocalypse of pipelines legislating their way through sacred water, and the apocalypse of the dogs, before which was the apocalypse of the dogs and the hoses, before which the apocalypse of dogs and slave catchers whose faces glowed by lantern light. Before the apocalypse of bees, the apocalypse of buses, border fence apocalypse, coat hanger apocalypse, apocalypse in the textbook's selective silences. There was the apocalypse of the settlement and the soda machine, the apocalypse of the settlement and the jars of scalps, There was the bedlam of the cannery, the radioactive rain, the chairless martyr demanding a name. I was born from an apocalypse and have come to tell you what I know, which is that the apocalypse began when Columbus praised God and lowered his anchor. It began when a continent was drawn into cutlets. It began when Kublai Khan told Marco, begin at the beginning. By the time the apocalypse began, the world had already ended. It ended every day for a century or two. It ended, and another ending world spun in its place. It ended, and we woke up and ordered Greek coffees, drew the hot liquid through our teeth, as everywhere the apocalypse rumbled, the apocalypse remembered, our dear, beloved apocalypse. It drifted slowly from the trees all around us, so loud we finally stopped hearing it. I'm just going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb so you don't get any buzzing. This is a new poem, as in haven't read it to anybody yet. And maybe one person has read it. So this one, it's short. It's called Upon Learning That Some Korean War Refugees Used Partially Detonated Napalm Canisters as Cooking Fuel, which is a fact I learned in the book Haunting the Diaspora by Grace Cho, which is a fascinating read. But anyway, how did we get here, you'll think, kneeling with your neighbors in the parking lot as the para-police confiscate your coffee? How did it get to this, everyone will say, walking north on the interstate as the cities swarmed in orange, swallowed in smoke? How did this happen? Though it'll be the wrong question when the checkpoint guard escorts you to a room where white-knuckled soldiers wait. Listen, I have a bad imagination. Dystopia is the word for what's already happened so many times. It's the reason you have clothes. No such thing as an undetonated hell. The pilot light clicks and I eat. Okay, I'm going to read two more. This one is for my friend, or after my friend, Aaron Samuels, our Nate and my pal, Aaron Samuels. Aaron says the world is upside down. And it's true. The cops are shooting rubber bullets at even the blonde journalists now. The target is on fire, and the Wells Fargo's shining face kicked in by white boys with gas masks and hammers trying to jumpstart their war. And yet, the upside down world is also, by definition, the same world, like the map that hung in the hallway of the house where I lived 3 or 4 lives ago. Argentina at the top, Greenland kissing its toes. It was a metaphor, someone explained, for seeing things another way. So yes, if it is true that another killer cops killed another Black girl's father, another unauthorized chokehold, another no charge again, once more, riot gear again, budget, once again, gas station, more flames, more who's to blame, gets blamed again, if again and again it is the same, then it holds that the opposite must also be true. The so-called opposite world of food drop-off stations, of phone trees, of bailouts and carry an extra mask, the world of kneeling for a stranger's gift of milk to flush the tear gas, the world of saying a thing in unison, so clear, it drills a hole through to the other side of what is possible, so clear and wholly inverted, we realize it's been here all along. O kingdom of fire, O kingdom of food, with the same mouth we take your blessings. With the same mouth we pronounce you, come. I've been trying to write these poems that are in this kind of like speculative mode. And I've been trying to do it for years and have been teaching lots of workshops about it, about writing speculative poems that like imagine a more liberated future. And it turns out that it's very hard. And so, yeah, it's just like, maybe I don't have anything exactly more to say than that, it takes like a lot of practice. And so some of these poems are, I think, trying to practice. that imagining. So this is one such poem. This is the last poem that I'll read for you all, and then we'll get to our other illustrious readers. It's a letter written back to me from a descendant, from a far in the future descendant. It's called Dispatches from a Future Great-Great-Granddaughter. Thanks for listening. It's in a few sections. So yeah. 1. Dear improbable you, what was it like to live so gridded, so track changes, so carceral, somnambulant, asphyxiating at split screens while nation glowered with rot? What was it like to slouch, numb-faced here and watch your image get dirty with algorithm elsewhere, shuffle into destiny's schlep? Did your pulse come haptic? Did you pay money for food? Did you dial 3 numbers and salute genocidaires with crest-whitened incisors when they knocked? Did you pray ever? Hope? Any? Or did you take a number, snatch what scraps you could and pet your children? Everything was happening and you were alive. You were alive then. What did you do? 2. Great-great-grandmother, I'm writing to you under chartreuse skies, after the great verticality, and after the multi-wars and their various rebrandings, and after tipping points numbers 1 through 379, and after, finally, the very long, very slow dispersal of things. I wonder if you can imagine it. The tall, tall oceans, the smell of sick gas and sani spray, the rhythm of jump dancers on the boardwalks, water swinging in barrels, grass-fed grass. There are 12 different siren patterns now, 1 for each kind of crisis. 2 honks for fire, 3 short trills for a runaway brain. A loneliness emergency is a low swoop, followed by a chirp, and so on. There are crises every day, and there's also bread bubbling on the counter, pickled beans, a cat who comes home. What I want you to know is that we're okay. Hurting, but okay. We're surviving, though it's true, we don't know what that means exactly. 3. Some rituals I do to imagine what you knew about freedom. Move my fingers over glass, swipe like a question. Swallow a bullet and not say I until it passes through. Touch my lips to silicone, sand, silicone, sand. Walk into the ocean and let the waves kick me over, then dry in the sun and lick the salt from my forearms. Sit facing a friend and hold our palms together without touching. Take turns completing the phrase, it could have been that. Draw my own face from memory. Ask a friend to bind me with rope until I can't move. Tense up until I cry. Then laugh until the ties loosen, until everything loosens. 4, last section. Under a graphless sky, I'm writing to say thank you for healing what you could, for passing down what you couldn't. I'm plentituding what I can. What I can't, I let tunnel me like roughage, like a bullet, like a slur I won't daycare. What you gave me isn't wisdom, and I have no wisdom in return, just handfuls of livestock. Every day a sky is, miles are. We speakish mycelium, and the till earth answers, and together we're making something of it. Something of all those questions you left. Thanks, y'all. That's all from me.
Ooh, thank you, Franny. Those were incredible. So if that's you practicing, I look forward to what comes after the practicing, because yeah, we should all practice so well. Okay, next up we have none other than the inimitable Lidia Yuknavitch. And after Lidia, we're going to take a quick pause before Nate reads, and that's when I'll talk to you a little bit about the organizations and the election and that fun stuff. But first, Lidia Yuknavitch, who is the best-selling author of The Book of Joan and the Small Backs of Children, the novel Dora, a Head Case, and the critical book on war and narrative, Allegories of Violence. Her widely acclaimed memoir, The Chronology of Water, was a finalist for a Penn Center USA Award for Creative Nonfiction and a winner of a PNBA Award and the Oregon Book Award Reader's Choice. The Misfits Manifesto, a book based on her recent TED Talk, was published by TED Books. Her new collection of fiction, Verge, was published by Riverhead Books in winter 2020, and it is amazing. Yuknavitch founded the workshop series Corporeal Writing in Portland, Oregon, where she teaches both in person and online. She lives in Oregon with her husband, Andy Mingo, and their Renaissance man son, Miles. She is a very good swimmer and one of my favorite people in the literary world. Lidia, please read for us. You have to unmute, Lidia. We cannot hear you. Ryan, are you able to unmute Lidia?
I am trying. Let me remove your spotlight real quick. Lydia, let's see.
Unmute me.
Oh, there we go.
There you are. There you are. Out of purgatory.
No problem. Thank you. Just thank you, Rumpus and Rally and Marisa and Franny. That was so beautiful. All the hairs on my body are standing up from the beauty of your language. Thank you so much. And Nate, I'm pleased to sort of meet you. I was going to be in the anthology that Marisa was in, the Burn It Down one, but I'm such a fucking slowpoke. I missed the deadline like 4 times, and finally they were like, Lidia, just give it up. But I highly identify with the essay that Marisa wrote about inherited anger. And so the essay that didn't make it was also about where rage comes from, how it gets born in a person. And in the case of this essay, I took on sections trying to track what rage is useful in my life and what rage has not been useful, and what rage is white, what rage has maybe some generative quality to it. And so I'm just going to read a small section. So I start off in my mother's belly, because maybe it started there, who knows? And I go quickly to my father's house, and then the house of education, the house of prison where I have been, the house of the state, the big White House, all the different kinds of places rage is housed. But this was a time where I used rage to break out and get away. And I'm dedicating the whole essay to you, Marisa, because of my love for you, but also all the ways we've had to examine our own rage. My father's house. Dear Rage, remember that time when I was 11 and I had just recovered from mono after weeks of terrible illness and weakness? Remember how my father stayed home to look after me while my mother sold real estate? Remember the white canopy bed of a princess even though I was already an athlete? Remember how when I finally got able to go back to swim practice after months of fatigue, when my strength began its slow crawl back into my arms, my legs, my kid fists? Remember how I punched the dresser mirror in my bedroom with my blow dryer so I wouldn't have to look at the princess canopy bed behind me any longer? Do you? Remember how my hand bled, how my mother cried, how my father yelled? Rage, I first faced off with you inside my father's house. His rage cage held no room for the heart of a girl, much less her own anger, if she had it at all. Did she have it? Was it in her? The shout of him, the bulk and glare, always more powerful, shaking the walls, battering the floor, beating as the heart of the family. But then her anger inverted like a cock split inside out and tucked up into a body. Her anger, a mouth blooming silently and pulsing between her legs. Who will name her anger? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fuck Fuck you. I was never the fairest of anyone. I was a swimmer, God damn it. My rage began to take her shape in the wake of my father's, in spite of the odds. At 17 and after 2 years without periods from the intensity of swim practice and weight training, my period finally returned as I started to skip workouts in favor of alcohol, sex, and food. My body found new form. My rage came with blood, a blood beat, a blood want. I wanted out. I wanted away by any means necessary. My father grounded me for driving his Camaro on a joyride with a boy, his yelling surrounding everything. Go to your room and stay there until you've thought about what you've done. Father language, father cage, slut. My tears were hot wet. I did not think about what I had done. It was the doing that mattered, and the doing had been worth everything. I thought instead about the windows in my bedroom, how low to the ground they were, how bigger than my body they were, like portals. I thought about how summer nights meant a hot, dark enough to run without concern for proper clothing or exposure. The thick sound of cicadas and frogs in Florida making their cacophony. I put my hands against the window glass. The latches made a schlock sound when I undid them. I climbed out my bedroom window into the eye of night. I ran in flip-flops and a t-shirt and shorts, and I didn't care where. My white swimmer's hair glowing like a grounded ghost star. I took nothing but my tampon I'd shoved up inside myself. This is my body was as far as I got, though I made it all the way to a swimmer friend's house in an adjacent neighborhood before my father came to take me back. Stop crying. Stop being a crybaby. Stop acting like a baby. In his other car, a red Jeep Cherokee, on the way home, I thought about a secret that I knew that he did not yet. That the entire exhaust system in his Camaro was likely ruined since I drove that fucking thing straight into a swamp, damaging the engine as well. The car had been towed back to my father's driveway while he was on a business trip. In the red Jeep now, my tears dried up. My face got hot, my head and ears hot, heat everywhere through me, heat like the whole night. And in that heat was a mysterious energy. This is my body, my vaginal body, the slit of me, the cut, the black hole, the life death, the threshold between inside and out, the space of blood, mine, or just rage, getting born in a daughter body. When we got home, I didn't look at my mother. I walked into my bedroom, my father at my back. I shut the door in his face. I stared at the door, half hoping he'd open it so I could kill him. And I meant it. Dear Father, meet my rage. This is my body. I'm a new creature. I could drown you in blood. 10 years later, he drowned in the ocean.
And now I'm supposed to talk to all of you and sound coherent after Lidia made me cry. But that's okay, because it's good to cry is what Lidia would tell me, I'm sure. And I love you too, Lidia. And I'm wearing my Kimmy Kitsch necklace today, just for you. And y'all should check out Kimmy Kitsch on Etsy because her jewelry is awesome and not super expensive. So yeah. Okay, we're at our break point, which is good. Maybe we all just need to take like a, or I need to. Those first two readings were amazing. Thank you, Franny. Thank you, Lidia. I am going to talk just a little bit about the 3 organizations that we've chosen to spotlight tonight. And the first one of those is MORE, mobilizing, organizing, registering, and educating. So actually, I'm just going to tell you the 3 of them again, and then I'm going to get into why we chose them. We have the Movement Voter Project, which allows you to choose a fund from a variety of funds that are, it shines a light on local groups that are focused on specific strategies, constituencies, and issues. And the Native American Rights Fund, which is working right now to combat voter suppression and is always working to support the preservation of tribal existence, the protection of tribal natural resources, and the promotion of Native American human rights. So these are 3 organizations that do good work all the time, but right now they are focusing on voting registration and election integrity. And I think we're probably at the point now where we're really focused on election integrity because voter registration deadlines are very close, if not past. So if you have not registered yet, you should check. It's possible. There's still time in your state. but hopefully you're all registered to vote. But we want to make sure that those votes count, right? And we know that we have an administration who is actively and unabashedly trying to make this election not fair and trying to steal votes from us and trying to stop people from voting. And yes, this was always a problem. I remember in 2018 at our rally Rumpus event, we talked for the midterm elections about voting and a lot of these same issues. And so none of this is new, but the unabashedness with which they're doing it is new. And if we do not stop them, it is really my belief that we are headed toward living in a fascistic regime. And so if you do not want to live in such a place, if we want to get back to a place where we can think about changing the system instead of running from the system, then, you know, making sure this election happens in as careful a way as it can is really important. And these are organizations that are focusing on spaces where we know that voter suppression happens more frequently. Some of us have a much easier time voting than others. And, you know, that can be race-based, class-based. It can just be about where you live in the country. So we want to make sure that we're doing what we can, even if that just means giving a few dollars to these groups. And know also that these are groups, again, that are doing good work all year round. So we'll talk with our guests at the end of the event about how they're feeling about the election, and then you'll get to ask some questions of your own. So I hope you'll start dropping some of those in the chat feature so that we can involve you in our conversation also, because we would really like to do that. But I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to introduce Nate Marshall, who I am thrilled to have here tonight. I've wanted to have Nate read with us. Actually, all three of these readers are, I just could not be more excited. I wanted to have Franny read with us for a long time also, and Lidia has read with us before. I am just so excited. And so I'm going to introduce Nate now. Nate Marshall is an award-winning writer, rapper, educator, and editor from the South Side of Chicago. I was actually told earlier that Chicago follows Nate, so wherever he is where Chicago is. He's the author and editor of numerous works, including his new collection, Finna, Wild Hundreds, The Breakbeat Poets, New American Poetry in the Age of Hip Hop, and the audio drama Bro Rabbit and the fantastic retelling of Remington Ellis Esquire. He's an assistant professor of English at Colorado College. He has bars. Nate, take it away.
Cool. All right. Thank you all for having me. This has been great. Lidia and Franny, it's a pleasure to read with you. All right. I'm gonna ask questions, I guess, in between poems, because I think it's really important to foreground and remember that these things that we're sort of wrestling with at this moment are not new, and for some folks have never gone away. And so I'm going to ask a series of questions that my grandmother would ask me when I was a kid. The first question is, how high is up? Cool. I'll start with a poem about my grandma, since we're there. Where's this poem? Sorry. Dang, where is it at? Man. Telling stories. A few times each year, I'm convinced of the end of singleness, the beginning of a singularity. I become convinced of the infinite curve of love. My grandma, like all Black grandmothers perhaps, told me do not tell stories, by which she meant do not lie, except we couldn't say lie, which was a curse word in her house. My grandma, like all Black grandmothers perhaps, told me stories about where we were from and who we were from, and the unbroken string of happy accidents and hapless miracles that made us possible. My grandma used to say, worst thing in the world, a liar or a thief. And I know I've been both these most deplored before. My grandma used to say, I love you. My grandma gone, my convictions gone too. Does that mean an end to the long curve of her love or mine? Does that mean I love you is always bound to end up a story? If so, what kind? The worst thing or one of the small impossibilities that put us here? Cool. All right. Y'all ready for your next question? All right, your next question is, how many bubbles in a bar of soap? So think about it. Landless acknowledgement. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that we live on some unceded bones. Sometimes me and mine imagine ancestral homes. All I got so far is Montgomery, Alabama. Maybe a boat, maybe a plot of land somewhere so far from the South Sides I've claimed that I would get lost on the way. I admit, sometimes my homies talk about their families immigrating and I get jealous. We lost the land we were custodians over before I was a twinkle in the eye of a twinkle in the eye of a twinkle in the eye. Closest I got to a homeland is my mama's Caucasian pitch on the phone calling the police. Closest I got to a homeland is not never calling the police. Closest I got to a homeland is my daddy's laugh in a spades game. Closest I got to a homeland is my lover's tongue, talking or otherwise. Closest I got to a homeland is the funk under a DJ's needle and my hand full of a dance partner. Not to be dark, but I am. Not to be dark, but the planet is on fire. Not to be dark, but they move in capitals because the water is coming up. Not to be dark, but our bones are in that water too. Maybe that's my capital. Once the polar capitals melt and there's a whole lot less land for folks to buy and sell and steal, maybe everybody will feel a little more dark, will feel a little more homelandless like we do. Why you think I call my compatriots homies? Maybe ain't no home, except for how your beloveds cuss or pray or pronounce. Cool. Oh, man. Let's see. What's our time? Sorry, I'm just making sure I keep my time. All right. We'll go here. Fit 11. How much is owed to those who wore the chains, who tilled the land, who nursed the babes, who mixed the grits, who fried the food, who chopped the wood, who picked the bowls, who ran the road, who fought the war, who shared the crop, who made the name, who wore the noose, who blacked the codes, who sparked the schools, who juked the blues, who showed the soul, who left the South, who stayed the course, who caught the hell, who marched the march, who broke the strike, who struck the blow, who took the vote, who held the hood, who housed the club, who queered the notes, who spun the jams, who funked the flow, who built the thing, who built the thing, who built the thing. You know, take the payment you ain't give for all that and press it down, make it overflow, fit 11 times and give me that in my own numbers, on my own currency. Cool. Next question. Name the Attorney General of the United States. And this will be my last poem. For those of y'all who don't know, those questions are all questions that my grandma told me when I was a kid from poll tests. Because again, this has always been happening. So, you know, this poem is called Finna, and it's for my niece, Juanita. It's her birthday today. So happy birthday, Juanita. So this one time, I was finna say finna in an academic context, and a voice in my head said, shouldn't you be worried about using a word that ain't a word? And I was like, word? And for a long time, that was how I let my life happen. I let my mind tell me a million no's that the world had implanted in me before I even formed questions. I let my power be dulled by my fear of fitting. But I remember a million finnas I avoided to get here. Like the day them dudes jumped me off the bus and I was finna get stomped out like a loose square. Or the day they got to shooting at the park and I was finna catch one like an alley-oop. Or the day my grandma died and my grades dropped and I was finna not finish high school, except I had a praying mama and good teachers and poems to write. I'm thankful for all these finnas that never were. And when I remind myself of who I've always been, I remember why my finna is so necessary. Finna comes from the Southern phrase fixing to, like I come from my Southern grandmothers. And finna is this word that reminds me about everything next. Even when I've been a broken boy, I know I'm fixing to get fixed. I'm finna be better. Every dream I have is a finna away from achievement. Each new love I uncover is a finna I fight for. Every challenge I choose to meet and not let defeat me is a finna I unfold. My hope is like my language, is like my people. It's Black and it's brown and it's alive and it's laughing and it's growing and it's alive and it's learning and it's alive and it's fighting and it's alive and it's finna take on this wide world with a whole slang for possibility. Cool. Thank you all so much.
Wow. Nate, that was incredible. That was absolutely jaw-dropping. Thank you to all of our readers. That was just so beautiful. I just want to revel in this just for a moment. I think we all should. You know, there's 50 of us together here listening from all over the country and all over the world to literature. And that's it doesn't get any more real than that. I think that's incredibly special. So thank you, readers. A round of applause, please. I just want to remind everyone to check out the Rumpus, donate to one of our causes. They're just so important right now. I know we're all doing as much as we possibly can. And to remind you folks that you can find a recording of tonight's show at LitHub's Virtual Books channel in a few days. And I think we'll open it up to questions from the audience or from readers. So feel free again to drop those questions in the chat. And I'm going to turn it back over to Marisa right now.
Now I'm unmuted. Hi. I don't think we have any audience questions yet. There are 45 of you, so give us some questions. But that's okay. I do have some questions. If we don't have, although I just saw one come through, so I'm just gonna start there. And Nate, it's for you. And I just I want to say myself, thank you to all three of our readers. Nate, I want you to know that you're the reader I started with for this event when I was thinking of the lineup. I think you know that because you asked me who else I was thinking of inviting, which is cool. I like being vetted, and then you responded pretty enthusiastically. And Nate published poetry with us in 2018. And ever since then, I have been waiting for Finna to come out. I think that the work all three of you are doing is beautiful and political, which is why when it came time to put together a lineup for this very special reading series, these are the three writers who I wanted to have here with us. And so Nate, our first question is for you, and it's, can you talk a little bit more about the usage of Finna? You're muted, Nate.
All right.
There we go.
There we
we
go.
go. I'm going to unmute all of our readers right now so we don't have an issue.
Wonderful. Cool. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Finna is in many ways like, it's a kind of Southern word, right? And it's a word that comes out of a particular kind of like Black vernacular tradition, though, in the South, like there's a kind of often a sort of proximity between like Black people and poor white people. And so those things, there's a lot of sort of trading in between those communities. But it's a word I've been kind of interested in or thinking about for a long time because, I'm interested in how, one, it's a word about, like the poem says, about everything that comes next, right? It's this word that is entirely conditional. It's like, oh, well, I'm finna do this. I'm about to do this. I'm going to do this, right? And I like that as like a sort of reminder to like look forward. But I also like that it's this, it's language that is in many ways like stigmatized, right? Like I don't know like a Black person who came up in this country who doesn't have some relationship to the word. If it was like a teacher telling them you can't say that, that's not a word, or a parent, or hearing cousins say it and be like, what is that? Or whatever. Yeah, and so those things are like interesting to me. And I think, in many ways, I mean, I see what you said, Dan. Anything that's Black in this country, more or less, is Southern, because, slavery and shit. God bless.
We have a question for all of our readers about rage. So I'm going to read it and then feel free to jump in if an answer is at the tip of your tongue, or we can kind of go down the row. So the question is, do you associate rage with a sense of helplessness? If so, what is the magical thing that has to happen to go from rage to empowerment? I have lots of thoughts about rage, and you can check them out and burn it down, but I'm gonna let, why don't we start with Lidia, because Lidia read to us about rage, and then we can kind of go to Franny and Nate if they also want to contribute to this.
I'm sure there are 1,000 ways to answer the question. It's more important to me to hold it open as a question and ask, what is rage as an energy? And in many, many ways, it can be the ground for revolution or the ground for change, but it can also be the premise for oppression or repression. And so it kind of depends who's holding the rage and what they're doing with it. And, so in one's own life, I think a cool question to hold open is just, what is it as an energy? And I have taken Aikido classes. How can I move the energy and take the inside to the outside and not receive the violence coming at me as a blow, but move the energy so that it, becomes something else. I'm very interested in just holding it open. Like, you go home and explore your rage and face off with it and ask it questions, or sit down and buy it a drink and tell it a story and see what it has to give. And I think our collective rage is another thing we're talking about, and we need all different kinds for it to become something generative and useful. But when it gets stuck inside a gut, it'll just eat you alive or become an energy you put back out in a violent or negative way. And so those are like 7 different ways to be thinking about rage and asking questions about it and finding it, like, where does it live in your body, is a good place to start.
Yeah, I love that. I took a workshop with Lydia, and I remember that question about where does the rage live in your body. I don't have an answer yet, but I'm still thinking about it. Franny, do you have thoughts about rage and how to make it productive, or I'm forgetting the word that was in the question, how to turn rage into empowerment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, generally speaking, little that I can say better than Audre Lorde has said. So I would just like refer people to her essay on the uses of anger. Just anybody who hasn't read that essay, I would just strongly recommend, because I think that like, you know, I think that Audre Lorde is also one of like many Black women who have written really, really insightfully and with like such ingenuity and brilliance about, and like deep empathy about like reclaiming rage as like a holy and empowering, not empowering, but like world changing force. Rather than like, you know, a box of helplessness to be put into, to, you know, to have been put into by the white gaze. But yeah, so I think that that's really, I mean, I guess if I could say something else, it would also be that, you know, that not to just like quote every revolutionary hero, but like Che Guevara also said, is one of my favorite quotes, let me say, at the risk of sounding ridiculous, that the true revolutionary is driven by strong feelings of love. And for me, like, for rage to be a force that can shape the world toward a more just version of itself, I think that it has to be rooted in love for one's people, and love for the kind of like possibility of the world. I think rage without love is like, yeah, can be an incredibly destructive force. And then I guess maybe if I'm going to put like a third kind of trollish thing, it would be that, you know, I've been trying to think about what, kind of also trying to reorient myself in relation to the word productive too. Like, can I make my sorrow productive? Can I make my rage productive? Which is like, you know, it's a word that we have inherited from capitalism, like an imperative that we've inherited from capitalism. So I'm also trying to think about like, how can I like orient myself to my like love fueled rage in a way that can move power without thinking of it as like a thing that my rage might produce. And I don't really know what the answer to that question is, but maybe it has something to do with like, what can it move me closer to, or what can it help move other people closer to? What can it get us entangled with? So yeah, that's my essay.
I love that answer too. Nate, do you have anything you want to say about rage and making it useful, or just anything about rage generally?
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I've been thinking about this. So this, like, I think I have a particular relationship to a certain kind of like expressive anger that like is probably the way that we're most likely to see or interpret rage, right? And you know, I think that relationship is like really shaped by my own position, and that like being a Black man has been an experience of like, when I get angry, people get scared and bad things happen. And so rage is like not a thing I've like, I mean, I'm often upset, I'm often angry. But I wonder if like rage is a thing very open to me, or if it's a thing that I've sort of practiced out of my own most set of emotional responses. And so I love that. I love that the Lord essay, and that Guevara quote was like on my Zanga page when I was like 14 or whatever.
Fucking leftist nerd teen.
I had like a Che Guevara like window pane t-shirt. It just had his face like mad times. It was great. Yeah, and my like conservative asshole homie was like, "Yo, isn't it funny that you bought a shirt with Che Guevara?" I was like, "Shut up." I was like, but like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think this is the thing. I think that too often we move between either like rage or kind of like blissful ignorance. And so what I'm more interested in is like thinking about how we as people can practice like paying attention and taking action to things that are deeply upsetting without resorting to rage, because often like rage, one, is not safe for many people, either to like practice personally, or like the rage that you practice can create like a lack of safety for other people. And so I think anger is really useful. I actually in some ways think that it's helpful for us to like move away from rage as a kind of, yeah, I don't know, as a, yeah, you get me, y'all got me.
It's like the only possible expression, like the only legible expression of like a desire for things to be different. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I think it's become particularly potent as the only expression right now. And it just like everything is so angry. And I understand why, and I'm angry. But I think, yeah, moving from that to trying to come from a place of love rage, which is the thing I'm going to be thinking about now for a while. I see a great question, but before that, I also saw a kind of light question. So I'm going to toss out the light question first, just to break it up a little. Can each of you share a favorite independent bookstore you might want our audience tonight to buy your books from?
Well, the easiest way to support your community and the communities you care about is to find the ones that are nearest to you and organic to your actual living conditions and relationships in life. And in addition to that, I would say it's pretty easy now to look up BIPOC independent bookstore owners and shift the economy anytime we want. We just have to like choose it and do it. So those would be two possibilities I would name.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess I'll take a moment to shout out like Page's Bookshop in Detroit and Broadside Books, which is like maybe 50 feet from my house.
Yeah. Let's say Semicolon Books in Chicago.
These are great bookstores.
And
My
Women
favorite,
and Children First.
Yes, Women and Children First, absolutely. Here in New York, I love Books Are Magic. They are awesome and tiny. And there's a bookstore in Oakland where I also lived for a while, California, called Walden Pond. And that is my favorite bookstore in the whole world. So I'm just going to shout those out. Okay, we're going to move back to something a little heavier. Wait, where'd it go? Okay. There's a lot of questions here. I'm going to kind of consolidate them a little, but Cheyenne is wondering, I hope I'm saying your name right, Cheyenne, how can we continually practice optimism given our current reality? It's so much easier to conjure an apocalypse than a better world. So I'm just wondering how each of you try to practice optimism. This is actually something I myself have been struggling a lot with the last couple of months. I usually am very able to turn my frustration into hope and action, but right now I'm having some trouble. So go ahead, inspire us.
Well, I love the writings of people like Rebecca Solnit, and she, in this essay that I'm thinking of, is referencing, I think, Ernst Bloch, thinking about I think that I'm kind of fundamentally opposed to optimism, to be honest, because I think that optimism is, as the belief that everything's going to be okay, helps you opt out of a lot of work. you know. Pessimism also allows you to opt out of a lot of work if you think that it's out of your hands and nothing's going to get done, right? Whereas like a fundamental belief that you cannot predict the future is maybe a driving force that might get people out the door. Mariam Kaba says hope is a discipline. And so, yeah, I think hope as like a thing that I have it on a post-it. What is it? Yeah, from this one book that I'm referencing, Solnit says, hope is not like a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch feeling luck. Hope is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. And yeah, so I guess I would, that's the thing that I would say, is that the work of believing that things can be different, but submitting yourself to the knowledge that you will not be able to predict what that looks like. That's like a discipline and a muscle that we all have to, I think, flex and build. But yeah, so that's what I would say in answer to that.
I agree with Franny entirely. And actually, Rebecca Solnit has written quite recently about the difference between hope as a form of action in labor and optimism as a kind of way to say, it'll be sunny tomorrow. You know, like there's a kind of attitude of it'll get better that has no agency or labor to it. And so, you know, her book, Hope in the Dark, is all about at the darkest times for different communities in the world, that bred a kind of hope that is attached to agency and labor and change in the ways Franny was just talking about. And also the work that both Nate and Franny just read even help us look at the word apocalypse differently. This isn't new. We're not facing an apocalypse for the first time. Those are just binary words we grab because we're scared or we don't know what to do, or we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But the difficulties and the struggles were there from the get-go in every culture and every people. And so how we approach something like the word apocalypse, what happened to me when I was listening to Franny's poem was like cellular shifting. We have to change the language away from what we're used to so that we can figure out what to do with our bodies differently. And even Finna, you know, it's in the language how we can change our bodies and reorient to whatever is going to come next. It's there in the language and it's in our bodies, but we're going to have to actively change it and reorient.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I have much to add. But yeah, I agree with both things. Yeah, and particularly like sitting on thinking about the difference between hope and optimism.
We have time for at least one more question. And so I'm gonna ask you Laura's question and tag something on that is my own question. Laura would like to know whether you think reading is a passive activity. I am also wondering whether you feel writing is passive or can be a kind of activism. So yeah, where does literature fit in to politics for each of you in your work, in your reading lives, however you want to, answer that question?
I think for me, how can I say? I don't think reading or writing is passive by design. I do think some of it is about like, I guess, how you're reading and writing and what you're doing with those things, right? And so, and yeah, and I guess to Ty's like question, I do think of passive in some ways as like, I took the used to be pejorative, right? A few things, right? One, I think like rest and regeneration and like feeding oneself and like one's community is important and necessary. And so don't feel bad for like the ways you have to take rest from whatever, you know, the kind of work is as you see it. But two, like in many ways, like things that are on their face active, quote unquote, can be passive, or at least passive in the sense of like not moving the world towards like a more just place or a more transformed place. Like how many people, as an example, like sit in, you know, a chamber of Congress for decades and do jack shit to like improve anyone's life, right? But that is in many ways like a very active job, right? Like, you know, you're constantly like taking votes and you're running around giving speeches to people, and you know, like you can do a bunch of shit and do absolutely nothing. And so I think, yeah, I'd encourage anyone to like think, like, don't judge yourself so much for like the tasks that you're doing or not doing, and think about like how do you employ those things in service of something greater than yourself.
I love that, Nate. Yeah, I feel like it's like, I don't know. I wanted to make a joke about being like I feel like anybody who's a bottom knows that being the passive role is not necessarily the one that's like powerless, you know? But anyway, yeah, I mean, I think that these are two huge questions. You know, like, is reading active or passive? Is what is the role of literature in activism and in kind of like social change making? Yeah, I don't really know how to answer either of them, except to say that that I think that like the work of activism and organizing, like the kind of like my like theory of change, that like real good change that moves the world into better places will be led from people from the ground up, like that is really hard work. Like it takes it like democracy, like actual democracy is so by a factor of 1 fucking million so much harder than authoritarianism. Like this is the trick, is that authoritarianism is easy, you know what I mean? For like it's just like fucking simple, whereas like, and all I mean is that that I would never take the work that I do, which is like sit most days, like sit at home and like think really deeply and try to make myself as soft as human and as human as possible, and like write the poems that might move the people that I care about. Like I would never like say that that is a substitute for any part of the work of organizing a neighborhood. But I know that there is a relationship between the work that I do in softening myself and encouraging other people to soften themselves, and that work. And I think that it's kind of honestly like a lifelong question of what that relationship is. Yeah.
I think that's a good segue for us to kind of close by talking for a minute about the upcoming election, which is now what, 2.5 weeks away? I think we're past the 3-week mark, but I would have to look at a calendar to be sure, because who even knows what day it is? So we've got 40 people still here with us. What would you each like to say about the upcoming election? What are your hopes? What are your fears? What's the one thing you wish someone was saying more? Whatever you want to say about the upcoming election. I think Nate may need to be unmuted again.
Nathaniel.
We're like cooking over here, so it's like I don't want like chopping of things to get in to mess with the sound. I don't know, Franny, what you want to say about the election? You've been doing like election work. You've been doing a little bit of like...
I've been doing a little bit of phone banking, a little bit of text banking. Yeah. I don't know. What do I want to say? I mean, I want to say that if you are a person who has like who has the privilege of being able to vote, who maybe has had like the privilege of being able to vote in your family for generations, then maybe it's like that many more times incumbent on you to put in some of the legwork. That includes donating to groups that are like you know, organizing on the ground, while being deeply rooted in community, like the orgs that we are highlighting tonight. But also it means like, you know, there are a lot of texts to send. There like are a lot of calls to make, yeah, and there's poll watching to do, and yeah, I would also say that like short-term organizing, I think, is a great way to build some skills, help meet some immediate needs, and get your feet wet if you are not used to doing certain kinds of work. And I hope that a lot of the people who are kind of like stepping in to join the ranks continue to kind of like stay in relation, you know, to those communities that they've like gotten involved with. I think that like one of the best things to do is to connect to a group that's local to you, to your area, so that you can like kind of continue to build. I mean, these national orgs are like amazing too, but if there are folks in your city or in your town that are doing this kind of work, then those might be especially great people to get connected to right now. Yeah,
agree with all of that. I would just stay close to the material conditions of where you live and who you're in relationship with, and start there. If that's helping drive people somewhere, great. If it's helping them fill things out, great. If it's making sure everybody knows what their steps are to vote, great. But also that this amazing election coming up and the vote, and the, you know, vote, we all need to vote, is like a piece of a story that has to continue after that voting period. It's going to take much more work and much more commitment from all of us to stay with it, and not just like, oh, phew, the election's over. Oh, cool. You know, like being deeply embedded in your own community means more than this part where we vote, even though it's incredibly important and we should all be doing everything we can to help. But it's like, vote and then verb yourself forward in your communities, and get a deeper relationship, if you don't already have one, to your community.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, one, I guess the election is yeah, I mean it's one, yeah, like you said, it's one step, and the work very much continues past that. And I guess I should like tell you how to answer the first two questions. My grandma told me, because my grandmother was like, perhaps, I mean, I guess very wisely, very suspicious of the United States. And so she was like, in case this ever happens again, here's how you answer these questions. She wasn't just like telling me this as like a sort of like funny story about the old country or whatever the fuck. And so the way you answer the question, well, it's funny that you asked that, Mr. Judge. I went outside just the other day because I was wondering how high up was. And turns out up was exactly 2,416.5 feet. Right. That number's entirely made up. But I say that to say that the thing that's important to remember is like, your oppressor is not very smart, and they're going to ask you questions that they don't know the answer to. Because it's not about the questions, it's about the power. And, you know, part of like for me, like part of the thing of the tradition in which I sit is how do you, operating with less power, move more intelligently? Because, you know, the people in power are not smart, they're just in power.
I also want to say, Nate, like, thank you for bringing in those questions and stuff. You know, like, I think that like so much of the conversation that's like, or the kind of the message that's like, everybody vote, everybody go vote. It's like, not everybody can, not everybody has been able to, like, yeah. So yeah, so I just want to say I appreciate it.
Thank you all so much for your time tonight and for your answers. I'm going to turn this over to Ryan in a second to close us out. Ryan, I also want to say thank you to you and to the Rally for letting us do this 3 years in a row. The Rally reading series is a very special reading series, and as it turns out, even online on Zoom is one of my favorite things. This evening has been really replenishing in a way that very little is right now for me. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart for being part of it.
Feels pretty special. Thank you, Marisa. That was incredible. Thank you to the readers. I think what I hear everyone saying is just stay active and stay involved. And so thank you again to the readers and to the wonderful Rumpus team, to Marisa and Ian. You've in the audience don't know how diligent and thoughtful these two folks are. And, you know, they are so modest, but, you know, if you can please, you know, take a spin around the Rumpus, maybe donate to them as well. They're an incredible organization, and like all nonprofits, you know, all of them could use some help right now. So the Rally will be back some indeterminate Thursday in the future. We're pretty loosey-goosey on our schedule right now because things are so bananas. But this was an incredible night, and thank you to all of our readers. It was really, really special. So, and thank you all for joining us in the audience. Great questions tonight. So keep it up.
And please donate to those charities that we dropped those links for, or find groups that you feel are closer to you and donate to those groups, but donate and do something.
I'm gonna unmute everyone so we can all clap. If I can do that, I think. Let's see, mute all, no. I don't know, just clap, please clap. It's the please clap moment. All right, good night, everyone. Have an excellent
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.